Okay, so we're going to talk about plant families of local interest. And it's interesting. In zoology and animal biology, I think we tend to focus more on genus and order. And in botany, we very much focus on plant families. So aside from genus and species, the most important thing that you can say about a plant very often is the family it belongs to. So we're going to kind of look at an overview of some plant families that are important to humans, and we're going to look at their characteristics and some representative examples. The thing about doing characteristics of plant families, and I'm biased because the guy who I had for all my botany in college, we had one dedicated botanist at YSU, Mr. Carl Chewy, who was an amazing human being, and he was a plant systemicist, meaning his chief concern was with systemics, with classifying and ordering plants. And he ran the YSU herbarium, which is the 4th largest in the state, not bad for a little old college in Youngstown. And he really focused on things like family characteristics. So in my first botany course with Chewy, we basically weren't allowed to know the species of anything. He didn't want you to know the species. He didn't really even want you to know the genus. He wanted you to identify things down to the plant family. So, that's kind of where I come from with this. But it is really helpful when you go out in the field as we get more stuff growing out there that we can go out and identify. Being able to see the connections between the characteristics of plants in a given family sort of gives you a clue to eliminate some options when you're identifying plants in the field. Okay, so with that, let's do a little refresher on classification. So here's sort of a rundown of the levels of classification that we use with plants. And have any of you memorized the levels of classification? King Philip, I originally started out doing more with animals, and especially insects and invertebrates. So it's King Philip came over. Well, in botany, we don't talk about phylums, really. We talk about divisions. So it's King David. We've got divisions and phylums. Yeah. King David came over for great spaghetti, but there's phylum in there. Anyway, the kingdom is Plantae, and this is in the 5-kingdom system, so Animaliae, Plantae, Monarans, Protistans, and fungi. And to run through classifying one of my favorite little spring plants, we talked about this little beauty the other day. 4 kinds of edible food, early source of pollen, brings up nutrients from deep levels of subsoil. Handy dandy. It's a vascular plant. Tracheobionta. Think of trachea, like your trachea, the tube in your throat through which stuff travels. Vascular plants have tubes in their bodies through which stuff travels. It is an angiosperm, meaning it is a flowering plant. It is a dicot. Magnoliopsidae. It's in the order Asterales. Fine, we don't care. What we really care about so much is the family. So this is Asteraceae, or Compositaceae. There are 4 plant families that have 2 acceptable names. This is one of them. And actually, I think we're going to end up talking about all 4 of them. The genus is Taraxacum, and the species is Officinalis. So when we talk about dandelions, scientifically we say Taraxacum officinalis. But we can look at a dandelion, once you get familiar with plant characteristics, you can look at a dandelion out in the field and go, oh, that's a composite. It's Compositaceae. I certainly don't expect you to memorize all of these levels of classification for any one plant. But I want you to know the general order that these levels come in. And I think it's important to know, for instance, that genus is below family, that we have multiple genuses, geni, within a family. Genera. Thank you, I knew that. We haven't really talked about this yet. We will, especially when we start doing field ID. Do you know how plants are classified? How do they get put into those families and genuses? Traditionally. You probably don't know this because it's weird and it's very unique to plants. They're classified based on their reproductive structures. They are not classified based on their root systems or their leaf shapes or anything else. It is all about their flowering structures. So when we start IDing, you'll notice that the book that we use, the field guide, goes solely by flower type, and then the description will list other characteristics. But they're very much, it's sort of all genitals with plants. Here we're going to really focus on vascular plants, and we're going to actually even get more specific than that. We're going to focus on one particular class of vascular plants. So within those two phyla, we're going to focus on angiosperms. And within the angiosperms, there are two classes, monocots and dicots. Now, monocots are the larger family, or monocots are the smaller group. They've got 30 families. There are about twice as many, a little more than twice as many dicot families, and a whole lot more dicot species. Now, if we look at classification and evolutionary relatedness with these guys. So, prior to even understanding what DNA was, biologists looked at species and said, yeah, these two look a lot alike. Okay, they must be related. You know, hey, if they can interbreed and produce even reasonably fertile offspring, they must be really closely related. Same genus. But it was all visual. It was all based on visual characteristics. And like I said, plants, especially the angiosperms, were all based on reproductive structures, on their flowering structures. And we'll talk a little bit as we go further about, you know, stamens and pistils and ovaries and stigma and anthers, and where those are related, where those are placed on the plant in relationship to one another, superior ovary, inferior ovary. So, you know, this system of two classes, the monocots and the dicots, comes out of that legacy of what I'll call visual biology. That this was all visual. Well, once we get DNA analysis, biological classification starts to change. And we talked about this in biology. We look at two species that we always thought were really closely related and go, oh yeah, they look a lot alike, but it's actually convergent evolution. They're not that closely related. You know, they evolved similar features because the environment presented them with challenges and random changes occurred, and hey, here they are. They look a lot alike. So, in classification, the goal, because some of the rules are being rewritten. I mean, science is being rewritten constantly. It's supposed to be. Science is not supposed to be fixed or stable or, you know, static. It's changing as we learn more. So the goal is that as we kind of rewrite classification, these groups would represent evolutionary lineages. Well, monocots do. Monocots are a monophyletic group. Everything in the monocot group shares a common ancestor. Unfortunately, dicots is like a giant garbage pail that somebody set out under a bunch of leaks in a roof to catch everything else. We didn't used to think it was that way, but it turns out when we look at the genetics, it is. So, you know, a billion years ago, what I learned was dicots are the more complex group. They evolved from monocots. No, they didn't. Some dicots evolved from monocots, but monocots actually evolved from an earlier group that were dicots, but not related to the dicots that come later, because dicots is a mess in terms of actual evolutionary lineage. So, you know, monocots, they're actually one thing. They are actually all evolutionarily related. They all share common ancestry. Dicots do not. It's kind of messy, but that's okay. We don't need to go any further than just knowing that. Okay, so now we get to have a little fun. We're going to focus on angiosperms for a couple reasons. Number one, we tend to interact with more angiosperms than anything else. There are more of them in terms of overall plant life on the planet, and they're also the ones we use the most. And when I say use, I mean eat, build with, wear, burn for fuel, everything else. But eating, well, I like to eat. Eating might be the most important of those. Because, you know, we can be naked and cold in a cave, but if we don't have something to eat, we're going to die anyway, so it doesn't really matter. That's a cheerful thought. Glad I could end your day on a happy note. Now, if you, because I wanted to refresh, I can't find my actual notebook from economic botany many years ago, but I wanted to refresh and see what, you know, better surveys said about what percentage of human calories come from what plants and how many plant species we're talking about. And the numbers are a little all over the place. But I found one really good article that said basically, hey, look, we've seen numbers all over the place, and this is what I like as a science person. So we don't know how they got their numbers, but here's exactly how we got our numbers. And we took this, and we took this, and we took this, and we factored in that, and we did this, and we did this, and we did that. Thank you. I know where you got your numbers from. Okay. So the 90% from about 25 angiosperm species comes from those folks. So now comes the fun of it. Can you guess what the top 25 plant species that we get food from are? And I'm going to tell you that you're not going to accidentally guess a gymnosperm, because every plant you are going to think of, I can pretty much bet you, unless it's a pine tree, is going to be an angiosperm. So with that, and if you would like to move to a more populated island, you're welcome to, since your island companion has left you. Okay, you can start your own little guessing list at your island, and we'll compare notes. Okay, so we did a little bit of brainstorming and a little bit of crossing off for the benefit of those not here. Here is the actual list. Surprisingly enough, onions do make it. I did not think they would. Apples, bananas, plantains. Now, note that, you know, bananas and plantains, those are different kinds of bananas. The sweet Cavendish banana that we eat on top of our cereal or making a banana pudding or banana cake is one thing. The plantain banana is a starchy banana that's grown and eaten in a lot of Central America. Apples are pretty common around the world. They originate in the Caucasus Mountains, the areas of southern Russia, and from there spread out. And they grow all over Europe and all over North America, and they grow them in Asia. So they've become a pretty worldwide crop. Beans are a fairly good source of calories and nutrition. Barley, cassava. Now, cassava is something we do not eat in this country. That's pretty much limited to Africa. Cottonseed, and I wanted to look that one up a little bit further. So cottonseed is pressed for cooking oil that humans use. It's an additive in a lot of foods, but in this country it's used largely as an animal feed. It's given to beef cattle. Grapes, ground nuts are peanuts. Those are peanuts. And it's really, there are a lot of peanut dishes in Africa. Africa has a lot of ground nut recipes, and it's sort of some in the Middle East, but largely Africa. Maize means corn. Millet is one that nobody mentioned. If you have a domestic bird at home, you might feed it millet, or if you put out bird seed. Olive oil, onions, oranges, palm oil, potatoes. Rape and mustard oil, that's what we know as canola oil in this country. So it's called rapeseed on a lot of the planet. Rice, of course, sorghum, soybeans, sugarcane, sunflower seed oil, sweet potatoes, tomatoes, and wheat. We will make some notes about some of these. The term rape does not have the same connotations in all languages you understand. And the plant is also known as rape or rape. You've seen rapini, perhaps, which looks a lot like broccoli. It's a member of the cruciferous vegetable family. It's Brassicaceae. So, Brassicaceae. I like saying Brassicaceae. Okay, we'll pick up with some details on a few of these tomorrow as we pick up on wheat. Because, well, I just gave it away. Darn it. I'll see you tomorrow.